What's up, besties? I hope you're having a wondrous day. Alright, so I just saw that prageru dropped a video on us, and it was as bad as you would expect. But it would be hard to put all I want to say about it in like a comment or a tweet. So here we are. Usually I don't really make ads for videos. I just sometimes base videos on stuff I was already making. But this time I deliberately made the drawing in my simpler, less detailed style, just to be annoying and also to do it quicker. I was planning on 3D modeling another mushroom house, but I postponed it a little. So I just saw prageru tweeting, why is modern art so bad? And it links to this video by Robert Florchak. And from what I found, at least I think that's about him, because it seems like there's a few people with this exact name and he doesn't stand out, sorry. He does actually have education in the field and was even a professor at the Arts Institute of Philadelphia, which is now permanently closed. According to the Philadelphia Inquirer, the closure comes 3 years after a former owner of the Art Institute of Philadelphia agreed to forgive more than $100 million in student loans to settle allegations that it pressures unqualified students to enroll and take out loans. And in all honesty, I don't understand this whole shit show, and my understanding of the American higher education system is quite limited in general. If you're interested in this whole controversy, you can pause and read the history of the art institutes from Wikipedia. I couldn't find much sources, and like the institute in question doesn't even have its own Wikipedia, it's just under this one. But it looks like just a gigantic scam to me as someone who's from Europe and is currently getting a degree almost for free. And I don't say this to allege that Robert has participated in any scamming. As far as I'm aware, he might have been hurt by this situation too. I was just checking his credentials and this is what I found. All I'm saying is that it seems like a shit school, and also that getting higher education shouldn't require taking a loan, which is nice American like this. Anyway.
How do we know that classical art, as opposed to modern art, is so good?
So we just start here from this thesis: classical art good, modern art bad. This isn't really related to anything that's been said yet, but one thing I've seen people saying is that there's lots of examples of people who only became popular after they died because their art was ahead of their times, and I was just thinking about this because perhaps we're sleeping on some great art too, because we can't recognize it as great yet, but here we are having this discussion about modern art. Also just the term modern, because do we really mean modern? That was up to like the 70s, wasn't it? Maybe like postmodern or meta-modern too. I don't know, I guess contemporary could be a better word, but what do I know? This is semantics.
We know it because it was produced within the demanding standards and refined principles of aesthetics, the centuries-old branch of philosophy that measures artistic quality. Painting, drawing, and sculpture employ a number of characteristics, such as composition, form, color, line, texture, and movement, to create beauty.
I will sometimes insert myself with something not that important to say, just because I always feel awkward using other people's clips in my videos, and I want this to be as transformative as possible. One very ironic thing about all this is how much the prageru videos have from modern art. Like these icons, their logo, this logo, that's not classical art. So if classical good, modern bad, why do these videos look like that? This aesthetic is actually very much based on like more modern art. I don't know why they keep on doing this, because they keep on bringing this topic up. I was trying to like see what they said on it earlier, and I just saw the amount of videos they have on this exact topic, and I was just like, yeah, I am not watching that.
To the experienced eye, and even to the casual viewer, each of these is present in any work of art worthy of being called art. Composition, for instance, is the positioning of objects, elegant and controlled in the hands of a master, or awkward and haphazard in the hands of the inept.
Look what you made me do. I am defending fucking Picasso of all people. At least I think this is a Picasso painting. Would be much easier if it was signed, but even if it isn't, it looks like it. Now, I dislike Picasso a lot, but you can't just present his later work and pretend it looks the way it does because he lacks the skill. This is a choice on his side. His earlier works show that he really knows his stuff. You could maybe try to argue that he shouldn't be making these choices and people shouldn't enjoy art with such choices, but they just do. And this is just the way modern art is presented in this video, like as a result of some lack of skill.
Color can be exquisitely balanced and harmonious, or garishly random and unsavory.
It's weird that he chooses this one to complain about the color. I like these colors here. The artist in question here is Francis Bacon, and honestly, even more than at the previous example, I don't understand why he was the one chosen to be put on blast. We could have gotten after universally disliked characters like Marcel Duchamp, for example, but Francis Bacon seems cool to me. I've been reading a bit like about him, and aside from the fact that this is clearly modern art, but I don't know, I like it visually. It seems like prageru would not like him, like when it comes to the themes of his art, and also probably not like as a person. Like I was gay, his art, I'm not sure it was supposed to be like religious, but it just looks like this, and they're offended that it looks like this, or if it was actually like deliberately anti-theist. I didn't read on that, but yeah, I think this might be like one of the reasons. I don't know. I'm just speculating here.
Movement can be uplifting and dynamic, or static and perverse.
I think that once again, this is not a very good example because your regular traditional Christmas tree isn't much more dynamic than this Christmas tree butt plug. I remember this was a meme a few years ago that haha, Paris has a minimalistic Christmas tree and haha, it looks like a butt plug. So funny that they didn't think about it. Paul McCarthy admitted that it was a deliberate joke. And this has me thinking, surely they could have used a better example of something that fails at being dynamic than a Christmas tree. And the word perverse got my attention, right? Right? I just think it's one very obvious example of the mask slipping a little bit because prageru pretends to be like objective, they use university in their name. They're not a university, just to be clear, but only someone with an agenda would pick this sort of example in language, especially that he's talking here about these quantifiers of art. Being or not being perverse isn't really a thing related to aesthetics. You could make the most aesthetic painting possible of an orgy if you wanted to. You could, and it would be perverse, but by a lot of people's standards. So, yeah.
In my previous prageru video, Why is Modern Art So Bad?, I chronicled how art began to decline beginning from about the 1860s when aesthetic standards were gradually abandoned. Unfortunately for the arts, not everyone agrees. I'm sure you've heard the arguments. Art is simply a reflection of its time.
Actually, I have never had that as some way of defining art. I mean, it can be a reflection of its time, but he's just creating strawmans to attack here.
Art isn't about technical proficiency, it's about making you think.
I think I've heard this one, but still, it isn't really that common.
Art is a matter of personal taste. There's no such thing as great art or bad art.
I mean, we have those like quantifiers he introduced earlier, but yeah, personal taste is important here too. If someone likes something, that doesn't meet these standards, it's still good to them, and these quantifiers aren't just God given. We made them up based on what people felt looked good. The way I always went on defining art is just the creative intention of the artist. That's it. Art is subjective because the ways we judge it are based on subjective opinions. Now, a lot of these opinions might be common and shared because the society we live in influences how we view the world. But the ways we see art has always been influenced by our feelings, and I don't think there is much point in trying to make it all objective and, trying to make sure all of these rigid rules have to be applied, because just why? Just give people freedom to do what they feel like doing. This is really not that complicated.
Where do these assumptions come from? For the most part, they are the result of art histories written and taught over the last century, not by artists, but by those in the humanities and social sciences.
That's me! Also, humanities include arts, like language arts, visual arts, or performing arts, and this whole video is just discussing philosophy around art, which is also a part of humanities. So yeah, that is a very weird point.
Not having an artist's point of view or experience, let alone artistic talent, these authors and teachers have therefore framed art in the only language they understand, meaning and social significance.
And I guess a bit of an awkward thing is that now we suddenly blame people who aren't artists, but just a moment ago we were presented with works of actual artists as examples of things being wrong. They did have an artist's point of view and experience. Some were even skilled in making the type of art this video is praising, so the let alone talent part doesn't make any sense, even by their own standards.
It's no surprise then that people have come away with the idea that art is simply a reflection of its time. It can be, but not necessarily. In fact, the great artists of the past didn't care one whit about reflecting their times. They cared primarily about creating art that looked good.
Yeah, the strawmen have been defeated. Congratulations. But here's the thing. I don't think we can say that modern artists in general care about their work reflecting their times either. Like, surely some do, but I don't think that's like a general rule. So
Art, by definition, is a visual medium. Therefore, its meaning and ability to make you think are secondary to how it looks.
depends. I really don't like how there's just no nuance whatsoever here. Yeah, a lot of time we like just seeing things that look good. But a lot of art that we love does have meaning, and sometimes the meaning is far more important than the visuals. Also, even when you just want to look at something without much thinking and analysis, I think it's still possible to enjoy it if it doesn't fit the standards of beauty. One of my all-time favorite artists is Zdzisław Beksiński, and while the man clearly knew all of these technical things that they're focusing on in this video, good looking isn't really one of the things that comes to my mind when I see his art. It's more nightmarish, if anything, and that's what people love about it. Surely we can discuss meanings here too, but we can also just look at another painting of corpse-looking people and like it for the way it looks alone. And the thing is, if you just focus on the technicalities, no meaning, no message, nothing, these like hyper-realistic, super detailed eyes or lips that some people make would be some top-tier art, right? But most people don't consider them that way. Why? Because they're boring. It's surely impressive to what level of detail some people are capable of committing, but that's it. Like, there isn't really anything behind it.
After all, there can be meaning in other creative mediums like literature and music. But the visual is what uniquely distinguishes art. Therefore, the visual is what most matters.
Literature and music are also art forms. What he's talking about is visual arts, but not even all visual arts, because he has to exclude filmmaking, theater, and all sorts of art that combine different categories. Which is really strange because all these art forms are often in some ways interconnected, and historically themes that show up in paintings are likely to show up in novels, for example, and so on. Also, music doesn't have to have any meaning whatsoever either. It can just sound good, so I'm not sure why it was like differentiated here this way.
In fact, a great work can and should stand on its own without the viewer knowing anything about its meaning. When a visual medium becomes more about what it means and less about its pure visual experience, it might succeed as, say, journalism or social commentary, but it has failed as art.
Why? We have not established that art has to look good yet, and why that's the single most important thing in it. Sure, it matters. We're talking about the visual medium right now, but I don't think we were presented with sufficient arguments to say that that's the most important part. There's a lot of really good looking art out there that is just unremarkable. And sure, it doesn't have to be. We can have a million almost identical landscape paintings of some mountains with trees and maybe a lake and stuff. But I feel like there's just so much more to human experience that people just like to both express and see expressed, even if it doesn't look good. I don't see why we should limit ourselves. I guess what they do in this video is focusing on the craftsmanship. Not actually art, just the craftsmanship. And honestly, I think that the fact that we can look at something as mundane as that picture and recognize that as art is in itself beautiful. Like, we've all heard stories about people leaving stuff in modern art museums and the visitors thinking that it's a part of the exhibition. I think the way we've been taught to question our ideas of what art even is and what we can see, and that we can see such simple or even trashy objects as art, I just think this is such an amazing effect artists in the past weren't able to achieve. And it's just good to analyze simple things around you and find beauty in them. And perhaps this also is a part of the ideological differences we have, because you're either able to see beauty everywhere and accept that different forms of art can be valuable, even if some don't look like it right away for you, or believe in maintaining hierarchies in art but also in society. Art just isn't a competition. Like, we don't have to constantly think about all these rules and just compete with ourselves to just make something that fits all of these standards best. Like, if you want to, you can. Nobody is stopping you. You just don't have to.
So, what do we look for to determine quality in art? It is found in the skillful execution of a visual medium. For example, in a great oil painting by the 17th century Dutch master Vermeer, the quality is there in the controlled balance of its composition, the harmony of its color, the masterful hand-eye coordination of its brushwork.
One thing that's annoying about this video is that it just paints all modern art with such a wide brush. Wide? No, broad. Anyway, see what I did there? If only I knew sayings correctly. The thing is, there's so much variation in it that it's just hard to make this type of generalization, and all this is just to build this narrative of some cultural degradation.
When we look more closely at the soft edge between the woman's arm and her sleeve, we can see that it was achieved by Vermeer's delicate application of paint. This is the very essence of artistic quality.
I think this is a strange detail to focus on in this painting. There are probably better examples here, but okay. From what I understand, the thing we focus on here is just the care and effort put into it. I mean, a lot of artists whose works we gave as examples of what not to do put a lot of care and effort into their art, and AI generators users, for example, don't put any. And so far, it seems like a big chunk of the AI images would be rated more favorably than by their logic than real art. They often have good composition, nice colors, and all that stuff. This is just so strange. And the thing is, also when it comes to this technique, and care thing, a lot of modern artworks took much more than they look like. Many of us have seen some geometric pieces and something simple and just thought to ourselves, I could do that, right? An interesting story would be that painting's name, Who's Afraid of Red, Yellow, and Blue, which are just that very simple looking geometric stripes of red, yellow, and blue. Two of them got vandalized because there was just a lot of people who didn't like them. In one of them, a guy have cut a long line through the canvas. It should be an easy fix though, right? Wrong. When they were putting it back together and put new red paint on there, it didn't match because of how much care Newman have put into the textures used in there to make the paintings disappear deeper, and just they couldn't match the texture of the paint.
And not, by the way, because it looks realistic or photographic, if you will. Realism is simply a stylistic choice. In fact, great art need not even look realistic to be great.
I'm glad we agree on that one. But this particular image actually surprised me a bit because it's in the, excuse my pronunciation, I'm trying my best, ukiyo-e style. And up to this point, I was convinced when we talk about classical art, we were talking about like classicism. And perhaps I should have realized we're not earlier, but this was my wake-up call, I guess, because I just didn't question maybe the words that were presented to us. If we're not talking about classicism, then what are we even talking about? Just art from the past in general? Like, how far back are we going? This is just so unclear. Perhaps it was like explained in his previous prageru video. Once again, I am not watching that. This should be self-contained.
It's no wonder that many people believe the myth that photography put an end to classical art, given that they assume that looking photographic was the purpose of a painting. But that was never the goal of the classical artist. Quality of execution was.
Once again, I don't think we were given an argument for why modern art has low quality of execution.
With each viewing of classical art, our experience of it deepens, while the experience one derives from much of more contemporary art is generally instantaneous, and, like a joke that requires a punchline, is over once one gets it.
Congratulations on picking an example of an interesting classical artwork and a rather boring modern one. Now what about the rest? You were just told it's not about any message or anything like that. It's just supposed to look good. Both of these things look good, by the way. Allow me to be a zoomer and use a tweet as an example now. Here we have a repaint of Vincent van Gogh's painting. Van Gogh is a modern artist, by the way. All you Starry Night enjoyers like modern art. I know it seems old, but that's already modernity. The repaint is beautiful. I'm not saying it's not. But which one is more remarkable? Which one did more to influence people? Which one has more soul? I really don't think it's the one that fits prageru art criteria more.
This is not to say we can't enjoy works of the modern era, but remember that quality and taste are different things. Quality is based on developed standards, taste on personal preference.
And what were these standards developed based on?
There's one thing great art will never do. It will never make a fool of you. Its level of quality is readily apparent to anyone with eyes to see, independent of its meaning. You might be thoroughly impressed with the work of a cutting-edge artist, with its impressive theory, but you have no way of knowing if you're being taken for a sucker.
The wording here is very funny, sorry, but the serious tone makes this sound so silly. I don't know how are we supposed to treat that like seriously.
Finally, unlike the inspirational work of the past, much of today's art exposes how coarse and vulgar a society we've become. Fortunately, there's an antidote to this. You'll find it in the galleries of great museums all over the world. Ask the security guard. He'll point you in the right direction.
And again, the goddamn conservatism showed up. How coarse and vulgar of society we've become. So is the suggestion that society was better back when all that stuff was made? And I've seen other people bringing this concept up, so I hope so. I'm just going to read off of Wikipedia for a moment. Degenerate art was a term adopted in the 1920s by the Nazi Party in Germany to describe modern art. During the dictatorship of Adolf Hitler, German modernist art, including many works of internationally renowned artists, was removed from state-owned museums and banned in Nazi Germany on the grounds that such art was an insult to German feeling, and un-German, Freemasonic, Jewish, or communist in nature. Those identified as degenerate artists were subjected to sanctions that included being dismissed from teaching positions, being forbidden to exhibit or sell their art, and in some cases being forbidden to produce art. Now, I don't want to call Mr. Robert here a Nazi. I don't think he's a Nazi, but he did, knowingly or not, just repeat a Nazi talking point here. And the thing is, you won't see it from this one video alone, but prageru is notoriously opposing people's individual freedom. They have tied to white supremacy and they're incredibly anti-queers, and so I think that would make sense for them to be against art focusing on individual expression. Another thing I find interesting is like just the message of this video, because he presented us with a problem, like at least he said it's a problem, and what's the solution? Because the solution he gave us is just, oh, go to a museum and look at good art, right? But what's the real solution? Because who is this even made for? I don't think this is for artists, because if it was for artists, he would say stuff like, hey, artists, you should do this and this and this and make your art like this and this. No, it's just, look how degenerate the society is becoming. This is for the general public, so it's not really like a way to like try to convince us to make better art or something like this. It's just, right, what is it like? What's the what's the actual solution? They're not suggesting any in this video, but I've talked about similar topics with other conservatives, and in the end, it often just comes down to some form of censorship. And as much as conservatives often pretend to be like, oh, for freedom of speech and freedom of speech absolutism, it's not really for, they don't really care for all freedom of speech, they just care for freedom of their own speech. There are laws in different more conservative places, like actually banning certain forms of expression. When it comes to Poland, for example, I don't think like Polish laws on freedom of speech are super bad, but this one I really dislike is you are not allowed to offend religious feelings, and this usually like 99.9% of the time is about the religious feelings of Catholics, Roman Catholics. Even I've never heard of an atheist saying like their religious feelings about not being religious are offended and like suing someone, but Catholic people do a lot. And like, for example, like Peace Jesus would not like legally stand in Poland. Like it would just not happen. And like they are trying to make even more laws like this. Like some time ago, they were starting a new project on like defending religious people from discrimination. By religious people, we mean the biggest religious group in the country. Once again, Roman Catholics. So they just like feeling like victims, I guess. But I don't know. It's very hard to pinpoint like what's the goal in this exact this one video, because you know, once again, the way prageru does it is that they pretend to be like all objective and stuff, and like the message is very subtle, but it's in all of their videos, and sometimes it's not subtle, sometimes it's very much not subtle, but in this case, I feel like they didn't go very far.
I'm Robert Florzak for Prager University. Thank you for watching this video. To keep PragerU videos free, please consider making a tax-deductible donation.
Once again, this is not a university, it's just a conservative YouTube channel. In the end, it's not like our society is somehow incapable of pumping out this type of art prageru considers good and moral. We just want more. And, you know, there is a lot of reasons I think conservatives wouldn't like modern art. They won't say it out loud, but, you know, it often challenges the status quo. Like, throughout history, it often did. They're just willing to ignore it or accept stuff that was progressive hundreds of years ago. It also requires and helps to build empathy and understanding of people of different identities or with life stories different than our own, which is not very compatible with the conservative ideology, because you can't simultaneously dehumanize different minority groups. A lot of the art that they idealize is just so sterile. I've said it before, conservatism stunts your media literacy skill. We can see it often, how conservatives will see a piece of media, like it, and read the exact opposite message from what's actually in it. We've seen it with Orwell's 1984, we've seen it with Matrix, I've even seen it with Witcher, because some people, especially Polish dudes, because Polish book, Poland good, Poland strong, can't see anything past a big, strong, masculine man with swords fights bad. But yeah, I think that's all from me for now. I hope at least something that I've said was in any way useful or interesting too. Obviously, a lot of the stuff I said here was very subjective, so if you have any other thoughts, or even if you disagree with me on something, I would love it if you left a comment in the comment section down below. And for now, just stay safe, stay hydrated, and peace!